Hey, welcome back to Dan's Chess Lounge, everyone. Today I have an incredible game to bring to you guys. It's between Yasser Seirawan and Jan Timman. Now, back in the day, the Russian players were dominating the chess scene. You had the greats of Smyslov, Botvinnik, Petrosian. Who else did you have back then? Stein. Um, Mikhail Tal, just to name a few off the top of my head. So you have some definite beasts of the game, monsters of the game. All, oh, of course, Anatoly Karpov and Gary Kasparov. I forgot, one of the two most popular ones, but they were all dominating the chess scene, and it was like, hey, is there anyone else out there in the world that can compete with the Russians? And so you had Yasser Seirawan, the American, and then you had Jan Timman, which the Dutch player, and they were approaching the same greatness as some of the Russians that I mentioned. And so you had those two coming up on what they call the West, the Western world, the Western society. And so you had a radio station called, a broadcast station called KRO, from Holland. They sponsored a match called Best in the West, and that was played between Yasser Seirawan and Jan Timman. And this was the game that transpired. Let's go ahead and check it out. It was like a 5 or 6 game match, and this is game number 5. Let's go ahead and see. Seirawan was white, and Timman was black. Seirawan started out the game with D4, Knight F6, C4, E6. You could have a Nimzo Indian right here if white plays Knight C3 coming up. You could have a Queen's Gambit decline if D5 is played next. Let's say you have Knight F3. You could have a Bogo Indian now if Bishop B4 is played, or a Queen's Indian if B6 is played. So we have B6, a Queen's Indian defense. This was one of the favorite defenses of Jan Timman. Knight C3. This challenges the critical E4 square right here, because if black fianchettos the bishop, he's going to be playing like the hyper modern type of position where he's going to try to control the center E4 here with his pieces, with his knight and with his bishop here. So let's go ahead. You have bishop B4, which is indirectly trying to control that E4 square because it's trying to remove the defender of it. Queen B3. The queen comes out early in this game. It violates one of the opening principles, but it does serve its purpose. First of all, it's attacking the bishop there on B4, and then second off, it's making sure that if black does capture the knight on C3, then white can just recapture with the queen, and it doesn't destroy his pawn structure. C5 here, protecting the bishop, and that also attacks the center. A3 puts the question to the bishop. Bishop retreats back. There's no reason for the bishop to take the knight. That would just give white a fine game here. So he retreats back to A5. You have bishop G5 here, pinning the knight, making sure there's no jumps here to knight E4. Knight C6 puts more pressure on the D pawn here. Now you have two attackers on the D pawn. Castles was played in the game, which is a little risky because now you have white castling right into where there's instability there. White's pawns are moved well ahead of where the king is, so that's a little risky and that's a little daring. If he would have played E3 here with the intentions of developing his light square bishop and castling kingside, that would have been just as fine as well. It would have been less risky. But Yasser was in a daring mood here, so he played queenside castle. Bishop takes now, and now you have a beautiful pawn sacrifice for the initiative here. You have D5 here. When I was looking at the game, he could have just taken with queen takes C3. That was the most obvious move here. but that gives black a very fine game after knight e4, which attacks the queen and the bishop. Bishop takes queen, knight takes queen, and then b takes c3, and then after the king takes the bishop, white is left here with a destroyed pawn structure, and he's got the double pawns on the c file, so this would be better for black, especially since they're in the end game now with the queens off the board. So that's why Yasser did not play that. Instead, Yasser played this beautiful pawn sacrifice here. He pushed his pawn to d5 here. Exclam. E takes d was played in the game, but you could have also played bishop takes b2. I know some of you guys were looking at that and say, hey, if the bishop is going to be captured anyway, you might as well get a pawn from it. But after queen takes b2, knight a5, e4 gives white this beautiful pawn center here with pressure coming from e5 is getting ready to come pretty soon. D6 is coming. White's really going to put a clamp on, put a clamp and a cramp on black's position here. So just for the pawn sacrifice, that would not have been beneficial for black. So that's why he went ahead and just took E takes D here. And now you have C takes D. And now the bishop, once the bishop is released with either E3 or E4, the bishop is going to have an excellent diagonal to play along. It's going to be very mobile and a very critical piece in the game. Bishop E5 here. D takes C. Now white has retaken his piece back, so now he's not down the whole piece. Queen E7 protects the bishop that was under attack. C takes D7. Bishop takes D7. E3. Now that light square bishop is finally open and released, and it can do some damage now. Rook D8, protecting the bishop there. And now Yasser starts his attack. Rook takes D7. Beautiful exchange sacrifice. Rook takes, and now you have the bishop springing to life. Bishop B5 here pins the rook to the king. Bishop D6 blocks, tries to make sure that Rook D1 doesn't have any real poison, but he plays it anyway. Rook D1. Now Timman can finally castle. 16 moves deep, and now he's just now getting castled. Bishop takes rook. Queen takes. And the queen is forced into this pin here. Now, just take note of how long this queen is under attack and under this pin for. I noticed it's a critical theme for the rest of the game here. Now you have all these different threats. You have bishop going to f4, attacking the pinned queen. You know, you have the knight jumping into e5. So black is under a little bit of pressure right here. You have bishop f4 that was played in the game. Just to show you guys, if you were looking at, okay, well, white can destroy black's king side right here with bishop takes knight. It looks good, but white doesn't really have anything afterwards. After pawn captures bishop, now you have queen d3 threatening to take the bishop. Rook defends. Knight goes to h4 with the intentions of going to f5. Queen moves out the way. Knight goes to f5, and the bishop moves back to c7. Now black is not in any trouble right here. So white doesn't have anything. So he lost his advantage. He lost his initiative there. It just looked good ripping open black's king side. So he didn't play that line there. Let me get back to the position. Here we go. He played bishop f4, double attacking the bishop there. Now you have c4, which is like an interference move here. It attacks the queen. Of course, the queen cannot take, because if the queen does take, then white will lose their queen with rook c8. So the queen goes to c2. Knight goes back to defend the bishop. Now you have a beautiful move here. Knight g5. It's a dual threat. It's threatening checkmate, of course, on h7, but the knight is also threatening to jump to e4, and when that would win the dark square bishop there on d6. So f5 is the only move that stops both threats. It stops the knight from coming to e4, and it stops the mate on h7. Now you have queen takes c4, check. Now you have ideas of smothered mates. You have a lot of dual threats going on right here with the queen and knight. The queen and knight team up to make a beautiful attacking combo. Bishop finally takes here on d6. Knight takes d6 and queen d5. Now you guys, you can really see how when black moved into that pin there several moves ago, I don't think black realized that the queen was going to be under attack and under this pin for such a long time. Yasser really utilized that theme and that motive of the pinning the queen. It's been, the whole general theme behind the middle game here is just keep this queen under this pin. Rook d8, trying to defend. Now you have knight e6, attacks the rook. Queen goes to c8, check. King moves out the way, b1. Rook d7 saves the rook. But now you just have the beautiful queen takes knight. And black resigned right here because if the play would have continued, rook takes queen, rook takes rook, and now there is no way to stop the rook from going to d8, check, and winning the queen. That will leave white a whole piece up. He would have the knight, and then this would be lights out. So Timman resigned right here, and he congratulated Yasser Seirawan for being the best in the West after this was the critical game that clinched the match. And Yasser Seirawan will go on to be one of America's leading and brightest stars in chess. And he's one of my favorite authors as well, and favorite chess commentators. If you guys haven't seen anything from Seirawan, make sure you check it out. He explains everything very in depth and very clear and concise. So you'll definitely learn a lot from reading Seirawan's books and his videos. Okay, guys, I hope you enjoyed this game today. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. See you guys next time.